Speedrunning is serious business. It might sound simple, but playing a video game really fast requires a runner to be in top form. They need to do loads of research into a game, studying the efforts of previous runners. They have to play the game dozens of times over and over again to figure out everything about it and get a feel for how the game works, as well as conditioning their knees to break the game over them when they fail a run. Planning a route and how best to optimize it can be taxing, and then the actual execution of that plan is even harder. Heaven help you if any part of the game is luck-based. A casual run can take days or weeks to perfect, and if you're going for a world record, you can count on it being for months, or even years. We're getting so close to the perfect game of Super Mario Bros. That we're running up against the limits of human potential. With all the work that goes into trying to learn a game or claim a record, one might wonder where the fun comes in. These are games after all, and speedrunning can be a thing that optimizes the fun out of games for some people. Well, while the process of doing a speedrun can be hard, that doesn't mean they can't have some fun with it. There are plenty of speedrun categories and challenges meant to be jokes, tasking players to beat the game in unintended ways, or sometimes just complete singular challenges within the games themselves. They give runners the chance to cut loose and have more fun, without anything major on the line like a world record. With the more relaxed atmosphere surrounding runs like this, more and more absurd challenges have arisen in the meantime to give runners something to strive for. I have just a few of the strangest and silliest categories out there, because this is a topic I'd be interested in coming back to. These are by no means the weirdest of them all, more just the weirdest I could find. Let's start with one that takes the dev-intended playstyle to the very limit. Pokemon's explosive popularity in the late 90s warped a lot of Nintendo's plans around itself, with sales of the Game Boy more than doubling in a single year thanks to the release of the first two games. These games were so successful that the only time they would drop in sales was when they ran out of Game Boys and copies to actually sell. And as soon as they were back in stock, sales went back up to normal. When playing the games wasn't enough for you, you could also watch the Pokemon anime on TV, getting to see Ash Ketchum as he went on his own Pokemon journey just like you did. Well, not exactly like mine. I noticed his Charizard didn't know Mega Punch, Mega Kick, Hyper Beam, and Blast Burn like mine did. With the popularity of the anime and the gap in releases between Gens 1 and 2, 1999 was primed to start the Pokemon tradition of enhanced third versions with Pokemon Yellow. This game put you in the boots of Ash Ketchum by giving you a Pikachu as your starter Pokemon, and introduced more elements from the anime, like your rival starting with an Eevee, the introduction of Jesse and James, and a friendship system that meant you could end the game with a seriously pissed off Pikachu. With how much this game wants you to emulate the anime though, what would it look like if you stuck to that prompt religiously? What if you copied Ash's exact journey as it played out in the anime? That's what gave birth to the speedrun category called Ash Percent, which tasks players with completing Pokemon Yellow in the exact way Ash completed Kanto in the original anime. The rules of the run are basic. You have to name your character Ash and rival Gary. You aren't allowed to use glitches, and the run ends once you beat the Elite Four and become champion. Already, the run is a failure, because it should make you play through the next 7 regions before you're allowed to do that. Where does the challenge come in? Well, you have to catch every Pokemon Ash did in the original anime in the order he caught them. First off, a Pikachu. Easy enough, a few text boxes, and he's yours. Caterpie, it's the most common Pokemon in the game's first area. Pidgeotto, piece of cake, a 70% encounter rate on Route 1. Just catch Pidgey and evolve it. Except, Ash never caught Pidgey in the anime. He only caught Pidgeotto. You have to get Pidgeotto, who has a 1% encounter rate in Viridian Forest. What most people consider the rarest Pokemon in the forest, Pikachu himself, has a 5% encounter rate. You're 5 times more likely to get a second Pikachu before you are to encounter Pidgeotto. If you think you can hold out until Route 5, where your chances skyrocket to 5, no dice, because that Caterpie of yours is a time bomb. Ash evolves Caterpie into Metapod fairly quickly, but by that point, he already caught his Pidgeotto, meaning that if you want to follow the challenge, you have to get Pidgeotto before you catch Metapod, meaning the only place you can get him is in the forest. After that, you have to get all 3 starters, available via side quests based on anime episodes. And then begins the hunt for Krabby, a Pokemon you can only get with a Super Rod, available on Route 12. Between getting the final starter and getting the rod on Route 12, you're not allowed to catch another Pokemon, or evolve the ones you have. Oh yeah, if you thought you were gonna mow through this challenge with Venusaur, Blastoise, and Raichu, no, because Ash doesn't own a Venusaur, Blastoise, or Raichu. He owns a Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Pikachu. You're also gonna want to catch Primeape at level 41 on Route 23. Except before Ash catches Primeape, he releases Butterfree. So you have to do the same and lose one of the 6 fully evolved Pokemon you're allowed to catch on this run. And getting to Primeape isn't as easy as it sounds, as Route 23 is the route right outside of Victory Road, meaning that if you want to get there, you need the first 6 gym badges, with your only available Pokemon being Butterfree, Pidgeotto, and 5 unevolved Pokemon, 2 of which overlap typings. But now you can use Primeape, right? Lot of good those Gen 1 fighting types are. Well, guess what? Ash gives up his Primeape in pretty much the same episode he catches it, so now you're down to only 4 possible choices for fully evolved Pokemon to use for the whole game. Oh right, I forgot. You're also down a team slot since you aren't allowed to get rid of Pikachu. Then comes the challenge's most ridiculous hurdle, courtesy of the banned episode, Legend of Dratini. In this episode, while in the worst area in all of the Pokemon games, the Safari Zone, Ash tries catching anything but a Tauros, and comes up short to the tune of 30 captured Tauroses. You guessed it, in order to accurately represent Ash's journey through Kanto, you gotta catch 30 Tauroses, with a 10% encounter rate and a high likelihood to run away. Luckily, given how unbelievably strong Tauros is in Gen 1, these guys make the rest of the run feasible, by making Ash's new team 5 powered-up Tauroses with Pikachu as their manager. After that, you just have to evolve Charizard and Kingler, and you've completed the Pokemon catching side of the challenge, as now all that's left is to beat the game. What I love about this run is how innocuous it sounds when you first hear it. Oh, that sounds like a fun challenge, playing the game like Ash, maybe I'll try that. Then the maliciousness of the wording really sinks in as you realize just how many traps this challenge has waiting for you. You have a minuscule pool of Pokemon to choose from with an incredibly poor type spread, most of whom you can't even evolve past their first stage because Ash was a lazy bum. The biggest roadblock of the run, though, is obviously the Tauroses, with the current world record holder for the Ash % run spending 4 of the 6 hours their speedrun went simply betting on finding the 30 he needed. This is even worse when you remember the Safari Zone sucks and will periodically kick you out when you take too many steps, and then you have to trek back to your spot to keep looking. That said, the challenge does have its fair share of allowances that give the players who dare to attempt it slightly more wiggle room. Thankfully, this Pokemon catch order has no effect on how you tackle gyms, given how you have to blitz through a lot of them to get the exact Pokemon Ash needs. If you had to tackle each gym with the exact teams Ash had when he fought them, the run would be impossible. There's no way to get to Krabby soon enough. As a result, you're able to use Pokemon like Butterfree up to their absolute limits until they stop being viable, which will take a long time since it can learn Confusion. And a single Psychic-type move is better than most Pokemon you're not even allowed to catch. Once it's time to say bye-bye Butterfree, swap him out for Primeape, use him up for all he's worth, and then replace him with Muck. By the way, did you know Muck spelled backwards is actually snake? And while glitches are banned, you can only ban so much in a game as broken as Gen 1 Pokemon. Certain Pokemon are able to exploit the game's faulty AI to make fights a joke, like Giovanni's gym being helpless to stop Charizard, since they'll see he's a fire type and try using ground type moves on him.
Why isn't this working?
There's also the tactic used in the World Championship run, which is to teach Charizard Fissure and then buff him with the items X Accuracy and X Speed, which will make it so Fissure, a one-hit kill move with low accuracy, can't miss, and will make Charizard fast enough to assure it hits every time. Fissure is a meta move. What is this, Gen 9 OU? Spamming this move will get you through the Elite Four, and once it's done, the challenge is over. The player base for the Ash Challenge is extremely small, with only 2 people ever recording results on speedrun.com. That Tauros requirement is really what keeps this from becoming a more popular challenge. But even while it's underrepresented, it's still a really fun idea that would even be revisited in Yellow's remakes, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. This one actually adds even more categories like Ash %, including 69%, which tasks you with catching 69 tails. Or Koga %, where you have to make it all the way to Koga's gym, take the entry exam, and fail. Now, if we want to make Ash % a little bit more accurate, I have a few notes here. Trade Butterfree for Raticate on the SS Anne and then trade it back. Beat Sabrina with a Haunter you don't own. Win the Brock fight by holding your Game Boy up to an active sprinkler system. These are just notes. But see, that's a self-imposed challenge with so many rules. Way too many to keep up with. How about we go for one that's much easier to understand? A nice, simple 100% run. All that needs to be done is that the game is completed from beginning to end, collecting everything along the way. You'd think that'd be easy in something with a small amount of short levels like a Sonic game. But there's one in particular that makes such a challenge much less simple. In 2005, Sega decided to show the world how it was really done by blessing us with Shadow the Hedgehog. And like a chimpanzee caving in another's head for inventing fire, the public wasn't ready for it. They wrongly assumed the game was bad simply because it wasn't very good. But those of us with a refined palate knew it was all downhill from here. They gave Shadow a gun. It's all over! What made Shadow unique compared to other Sonic games was that it featured 23 levels, when other games of the time capped out at about 14, not counting boss fights. The hook, though, was that you wouldn't be able to play all of them in a single run-through. Instead, you would get to visit particular stages depending on which of the stage's 3 objectives you chose to complete. This gives the game extremely varying lengths depending on the route you end up taking. A straight shot from the start of a level to the end for a pure neutral run will take about half an hour. But routes with difficult objectives like Air Fleet tasking you with destroying the President's escape pod, or Central City having you hunt down bombs can add on a lot of time. Any route that sends you through Lost Impact is sure to get a big ol' 20 minutes added onto it as you get lost trying to find all the artificial chaoses. It's a good game, don't believe the papers! With all of these stages, it becomes clear that a full 100% run of the game will end up taking a long time. You've got to A-rank every level in the game, collect all 6 of the game's unlockable guns, and level them up to full power, find the 5 different hidden keys around each level, and complete the routes that come with them, and get all 10 of the possible endings, ending out with the game's secret final level. Sounds like a lot, but speedruns already on the leaderboard don't tend to go over 6 hours, so if you know what you're doing, you can clear it pretty easily. If you're a coward! See, it's not as simple as that, because all the stuff that most people count towards a 100% run of Shadow the Hedgehog, including the game itself, is what I just said, there is a final measuring stick for success that often goes ignored: the library. The library is a feature in the game where you can replay the cutscenes from a route you've taken, letting you relive the story exactly how you crafted it. Like how Shadow ventured into the Black Comet to save Earth, only to betray Sonic at the last second because he doesn't like him very much. Every entry into the library has a name associated with it, and if you thought they'd be normal, allow me to remind you what the first sound you hear when starting the game is. Punisher of Love, Bullets from Tears, Shadow surpassing Shadow, I Know the Will of Heaven, Punishment, Thy Name is Ruin, The Nightmare's Sublimation, Seduced by the Taste of Blood, Archimedes and the Tortoise? I could go on all day. Shadow's second death? Demise wrought by tragedy, The Devil born by betrayal, Steel combat boots, Funeral procession in space, The strongest Hedgehog! Alright, so how many of these different endings are there? There are only 10 possible endings in the game, to either go hero or dark during the 5 possible final levels, so I have to have named all 20 by this point, right? Well, that's not really how the library works. I said the library will replay the cutscenes from the route you've taken, so if you want to complete the library, you have to get every combination of cutscenes possible. So to get a new Empire's Beginning, you have to clear the whole neutral campaign, and then pick the hero route with Omega during Lava Shelter. But if you want to get an Android's Rebellion, you have to do the dark route with Eggman instead. To clear every possible ending and add them to the library, you have to complete Shadow the Hedgehog 163 times. Sound bad? Well, it gets worse when you remember you need to beat all those routes again, flipping the final choice you make. So if you play through all of them once to get the hero endings, you need to replay Shadow another 163 times in order to get the dark endings instead. Frankly, the requirement to upgrade the guns is going to be paltry, seeing as you're going to be completing each route upwards of 65 times. Now, the reason that the library isn't counted towards 100% runs should be obvious. It'd be a massive time sink if players were forced to clear the game 326 times, and nobody would ever even attempt that. Of course, somebody has attempted it, but it's hard to tell if they came out the better for it. The only actual, complete, 100% run of Shadow the Hedgehog was completed by the runner Blazing Zeddy, based on his favorite characters in the entire franchise. This was a speedrunner who was already intimately familiar with the game, as he's done normal, non-library runs of the game. His library run, though, was special, as it took him 181 hours, 14 minutes, and 47 seconds to complete the game over the course of 53 days. Now, it is worth pointing out that this run is extremely segmented. Those 181 hours weren't done back to back, otherwise the world record holder would be a corpse. 181 hours roughly equates to 7 days, so he stretched a week's worth of Shadow across those 53 days, able to clear paths with some comfort thanks to the Chaos Control glitch, a glitch that allows you to move through a stage super fast thanks to Shadow's Chaos Control. The downside of that glitch, though, is that it has an extremely high likelihood of crashing the game. Over the 7 days worth of Shadow the Hedgehog that Zeddy played, the game ended up crashing 98 times. And I will forever be pissed off that he didn't crash the game 2 more times to round it out to a nice 100. Zeddy remains the only recorded case of somebody running Shadow the Hedgehog this way, and as a result is not recognized on speedrun.com. In part due to his whole run not being preserved and therefore not being verifiable. What the f*** do you gain from lying about this? The only runs that can beat it in terms of length, unfortunately beat it into the sun, as this is nowhere near the longest speedrun of all time. Games that beat it include Baten Kaitos at a 14 straight day long speedrun, and Spider, Rite of the Shrouded Moon, at 22 days. How do these games take so long? I don't gotta tell you everything. Seeing as the point of a speedrun is to get to the end as fast as possible, is there any end that can come faster than death? A common speedrunning category for a load of different games is death percent. Finding the fastest possible way to off yourself in a game is something loads of people are racing to find. One game that tasks people with finding out what the inside of a casket looks like is Ultra Kill. Yeah, the kill you ultra can be your own. Death Percent tasks players with finding the quickest ways to die, usually in the game's cyber grind mode, seeing as it comes with a built-in timer specific to the game mode. Luckily for you, Ultra Kill's high-risk, high-reward style means there are plenty of ways to stack the deck against yourself. 2 of your weapons can cause self-damage if used improperly, one of which being the rail cannon with the Maurice mod. This fires a huge splash damage laser that takes a hefty bit of health from V1 if they're caught in the splash zone. It also pushes you backwards, which is extremely important to get you into the actual level as soon as possible. From there, you have to rely on the shotgun, which can be overpumped multiple times in order to deal extra damage. Pumping too many times, though, will inflict a nasty receipt. So after launching yourself with the rail cannon, simply overpump the shotgun, pull the trigger, and your history. These runs tend to push the boundaries of what counts as time, as the current world record is an 11-way tie, with each one of them dying in 1 millisecond. The run category on speedrun.com has banned times of 0 seconds, so if you want to get the record, the space on the first place podium is going to be cramped. Let's say you want to marathon an entire series as Death Percent speedruns. And let's say you have a real beef with the Scholastic Book Fair. There's a set of games perfect for you, and that's the Nancy Drew Death Percent speedruns. The company Her Interactive has been publishing yearly Nancy Drew games from 1998 all the way up to 2015, frequently double-dipping and releasing 2 Drew games in a single year. They're your typical point-and-click adventure games, and like most entries into the genre, there are situations you can find yourself in where Nancy bites the big one and ends up dying. That's right, almost every one of the nearly 35 mainline Nancy Drew point-and-click adventure games has a situation where you can kill Nancy Drew. Well, okay, so they're not all deaths. Sometimes Nancy just screws up and is taken off the case, but there's a frankly concerning amount of games where Nancy can die. These include building a bomb and then setting it off in your face, dropping a chandelier on your head, falling down the stairs, getting bitten by a poisonous spider, and getting attacked by a slightly aggressive house cat. What's more is that certain games have multiple options to off-Drew, with some options being more optimal than others. For instance, in Nancy Drew, Danger on Deception Island, fast travel around the map is done by bike riding. If you don't put on a helmet before riding your bike, though, there's a chance Nancy will take a header onto a rock and end up hospitalized. In Nancy Drew and the Haunted Carousel, one of the earlier puzzles requires you to use a clothing iron in your hotel room. If you don't unplug the iron before going to the next location, you get a call saying you burned down the hotel and you're going to jail. The fact these are kids' point-and-click adventure games, and that means that the attempts to teach kids good lessons with game overs were used as speedrunning tech, is immaculate game design. The fastest way to kill Nancy Drew, though, comes from the original game Secrets Can Kill, where entering the diner and collecting the bolt cutters without stopping a gas leak causes the whole building to blow up in only 7 seconds, with only ghost dogs of Moon Lake coming close, since all you need to do is turn to the left and walk onto some weak floorboards. The only games to lack a Death Percent run are Lights, Camera, Curses, and Resorting to Danger, the 2 games in the Nancy Drew Dossier series, which appears to be the pussy branch of the Nancyverse. I know that this is a lively category because looking at the rankings on speedrun.com reveals that 2 verified Drew crew members, Ersapon and Toasterberry, are in a nuclear arms race to see who can kill Nancy Drew faster, with the 2 trading records back and forth in almost every game. Even one of the most famous speedrunning games of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, has a Death Percent speedrun. And that Death Percent has subdivisions because of how many people were doing it. When you see people speedrunning this game in the Super Smash Bros. Brawl demo version, you knew people were going to be doing stuff like this. Go Home and Die Percent is a speedrun tasking players to find a way to kill themselves in Link's home that you start the game in. Which sounds impossible, as there should be no way to do that since you can't use items in the house. 5 minutes later, and players found that by glitching out of the starting area, collecting bomb chews, and then dying to respawn back at your house, you can stand in front of the door to your house and jump back at the same time as a bomb chew blows you up. Jot Wad and Jot Wall are two sister speedruns that have very similar objectives. Both start similarly to go home and die %, with you escaping the opening area and then making your way to Kakariko Village. Except instead of trekking all the way back home to finish yourself off, you instead climb to the top of the Kakariko Village watchtower and jump off. So, what's the difference between a Jot Wad and Jot Wall run? Well, Jot Wad is jump off the watchtower and die, while Jot Wall is jump off the watchtower and live. To do that, you'll need to find a fairy to revive you once you jump off the tower. Which means that Jot Wall runs oftentimes take 5 times as long to complete as a Jot Wad run, because the RNG of finding a fairy means much more can go wrong. There's a beautiful metaphor in here, but I choose not to find it. My favorite death % speedrun, though, comes from the illicit drug called Factorio. Factorio hit Steam's storefront in 2020 and hit the general public like a goddamn train. This has never been a game I could see myself getting into, but only because I know I have an addictive personality, and if I invested much time into a game like this, my family would be down a son. This game is incredibly addictive, and the process of building up factories is so intricate and detailed that you'll lose hours simply connecting everything to power grids and traveling from station to station for upgrades. However, as the crippling realization that you're killing the planet's ecosystem sets in, you might want to find a way out. And barring building that rocket you need quick enough, there is one other solution. That's where a watch your step speedrun of Factorio comes in. See, when you crash land on this alien planet, you're responsible for building everything. You mine materials to build new stuff, including conveyor belts to carry more material, and factories to build bigger and better stuff. Your massive web of interconnected systems might be taxing to travel on foot, or you might have multiple factories humming along at the same time working on different tasks. In order to make transportation easier, you can build trains that carry you around much faster than your little legs can. But what's funny about trains is that they work really well when you're inside of them, but when you step out, they become a lot less efficient. You guessed it, watch your step % speedruns task you with building a train, and then hitting yourself with a train. Imagine somebody landing on an alien planet and instantly losing hope. They say, I gotta kill myself. But instead of just jumping off something high or taking off your helmet, they build a decently sized and fully functional factory with the sole intent being to build a train to run yourself over with. It's not like trains are an early game build or anything, you have to work really hard to be able to build them, ignoring any other build as you try to fulfill your dream of exiting this world via Thomas-assisted suicide. Remember, you can build guns in this game. If you're looking to exit the world via fast metal object, that'd be my first choice over a train. Watch your step % speedruns sadly don't do much different compared to a regular Factorio speedrun, aside from end a lot earlier. So if you're trying to speedrun the game already, why not take a little time to see what life is like on the other side of the tracks? Particularly the middle. Now all of this can sound really hard. I mean, do you know how much effort goes into building a train? I do, and the results speak for themselves! Speedruns are hard work. Undoubtedly the hardest part is the actual execution. Nailing sometimes frame-perfect inputs back-to-back sounds maddening, and it can feel like an impossible barrier for entry for those who want to get into the hobby. Well, I'm glad to say that there's a speedrun for you! One where inputs like that aren't just not required, but outright banned. In 1988, Texas-based teacher Cheryl Leach noticed how children were more willing to listen to dinosaurs than their own parents, and used that information to craft 3 direct-to-VHS shorts called Barney and the Backyard Gang, which would eventually become the series Barney and Friends. This was largely considered a mistake. Barney became the baby show of the 90s and early 2000s. And with his popularity came an amount of hatred mostly saved for terrorists. Teenagers and adults hated Barney so goddamn much. Like, there's not liking something and finding it annoying, and then there's death threat hatred. I don't think a lot of the youth knows just how easy it was to find videos of people wishing death on a purple dinosaur. All this motherfucker did was say that you should hug people and learn to count. I hope you die! I hope you die and go to hell where you belong, you evil motherfucker! Hating back then was a completely different beast, man. Imagine now if a large majority of the adult population agreed that Bluey should be dragged out into the streets and shot. It was like that. I was there! I remember being told all the Barney rumors. The most popular one in my town was that Barney actors were the biggest career criminals they could find, and that there was a prison in Arizona dedicated to housing Barney actors, because they wouldn't stop selling drugs to children. One of the oldest operating websites on the entire internet is a page where you can shoot Barney. Anyway, before that webpage in 1995, the most accessible way to kill Barney was Barney's hide-and-seek game for the Genesis in 1993. The game's tutorial is its title. The game is a simple hide-and-seek game where you, as Barney, have to go around these maps, find all the objects and friends you can, and then leave. It has a review, and is the only Barney game to ever be released on console instead of the PC. As you can tell, there really isn't a lot to say about hide and seek, except that this game is an incredibly popular speedrunning game, with records being held by a baby, multiple different dogs, crowds of people, and the game itself. Truly the DDT Iron Heavy Metalweight Championship of speedrunning. So what's the gimmick here? Well, since Barney is a game designed for extremely young children, they put in a safety mechanic so that if a child got lost or distracted, Barney would take over control and start to play the game for you. He doesn't just get you back on track either, Barney will complete entire levels if left on his own. Which got some people thinking. F it, I got 9 minutes to burn. Thus began Any Percent, No Controller. The rules of this run are simple. Start the game without a controller plugged in. The game ends when Barney is able to finish the game for you. And you're not allowed to use any inputs or influence Barney in any way. That sounds like it'd be really boring, seeing as there wouldn't be any variance in how the game is played. Barney's gonna take the exact same path every time, right? Well, that's where Barney gets a little sassy. See, a large part of this run comes down to RNG, as Barney will take different routes each time, doing randomly selected tasks in different orders. Not only that, but he'll also randomly comment on elements you pass in the game, like talking to his animal friends or asking the player to press a button when they see a present. Little does he know, I can't do that even if I wanted to. Like I said, you can't press any buttons, so you just have to hope that Barney plans on moving optimally instead of smelling every flower he sees. Of course, for a category like this, there is no strategy. What separates the fastest run of 9 minutes and 8 seconds from the slowest run of 10 minutes and 18 seconds is simply how Barney was feeling when you turned the Genesis on. That didn't stop this from becoming a super popular category to run, with over 100 runs in just the solo, no controller category. Oh yeah, there's a co-op, no controller category as well, which was really just created because people wanted to watch Barney jump around with their friends. The simplicity of this run has, like I said, led the run to be completed by its intended audience of babies, dogs who just have to watch the screen as the game plays, and even entire speedrunning events that hosted Barney speedruns for people to watch live. This one from the Benelux Speedrunner Gathering is such a joy to watch as the crowd gets more and more hyped, cheering and booing Barney depending on what he's doing, chanting for Barney and doing big crowd motions. I don't want to sound too sappy, but it really does showcase what can make speedrunning so great. Everybody here came to this event because they love speedrunning, and now get to gather around and have a great time cheering for a run that doesn't even have a controller plugged in. These sorts of moments where everybody gets on the same page, no matter how dumb it is what makes speedrunning so fun. This has gotta be the first time Barney's ever seen a large group of people happy to see him.